Over the past few months, Tamil Nadu has witnessed a series of protests led by women. Sanitation workers have been agitating against the outsourcing of their jobs. Teachers have been demanding that the government honor its long pending promises, and nurses have taken to the streets seeking regularization of their contractual employment. Many of these protests have been met with police clampdown, preventive detention, and restriction on assemblies, sending out a clear message that dissent is being treated as law and order issue rather than a matter of dialogue and resolution. This has thrown up sharp contradiction. On the one hand, the DMK government repeatedly highlights Tamil Nadu's high women workforce participation and its commitment to women's empowerment. On the other, the legitimate demands raised by working women on the streets are increasingly being viewed as a political threat. In this week's In Public Interest, I'm joined by Sujata Modi, President of Pen Tholilalargal Sangam, to discuss why the unionization of women workers is being seen as a threat and why protests by women are being met with police action instead of meaningful engagement. We launched In Public Interest this year to focus on issues that affect you, from social and civic concerns to banking and finance. We have reported these stories from the ground with care and context. If you have been watching and sharing our work, thank you for being with us. If you believe this kind of journalism must continue, we need your support to take it forward. For a limited time, we are offering 20% off on an annual joint subscription and 15% off on a 6-month joint subscription. Scan the QR code on your screen to support us, and before you head into your holidays, do your part to keep independent journalism alive. Ma'am, thank you so much for talking to us. Ma'am, we have been seeing a lot of protests by sanitary workers, by school teachers, temporary teachers. Now the nurses are protesting. What do you think of the way in which the Tamil Nadu government is handling these protests?
The first thing is that people are protesting because there has been initially no dialogue. 2, they feel that they have been let down and the promises that were made to them in the past were not kept. And 3, they just feel that the government machinery is not really receptive to their ideas. So I think they also have certain rights to increase in wages and, better working conditions. Recognition of their work is a very important thing for them. Recognition of the fact that, the prices are increasing and their wages are they're on consolidated pay, they can't manage. So it is natural for women to come out under the very circumstances that they are in.
So you have been part of these sanitary workers protests, like you have been interacting with them. They have been protesting for more than 200 days almost. So what exactly is happening in their case? Like, there have been talks that were held, but nothing seems to have progressed?
Well, the sanitary workers were mostly recruited under what is called the National Urban Livelihood Mission. And the NULM actually does not recognize them as workers, but as somebody who need jobs. So it's a livelihood mission. And they're contracted out, or NGOs are asked to recruit them in numbers not more than 20. So actually the NULM expects to recruit workers who will not be covered by any labor laws. Fortunately or unfortunately, the women realize this in certain areas. In some areas, they understood this problem and they have been consistently saying that they have certain demands for wages or for improvement in their working conditions. So the present sanitary workers actually are organized as a group, and they have been demanding a higher wage. Once they got the higher wage, sometime in April this year, which meant that from 15,000 or 16,000 rupees, they would be in the category of 23. So after 2 or 3 months of receiving a little higher wage, they were told just arbitrarily overnight on the 31st of the month and told that, from the next day you will be joining to work with a contractor. I don't know. I really don't know under which law anybody can be treated like this. We've only heard that in the West, in America, you can just dismiss a worker, so Amazon lays off 17.
Google lays off.
Yeah. So it was like kind of, it just throws you back, what is this happening here in India?
So when the government says that, they take pride in the fact that Tamil Nadu has the largest number of women workforce in the country, 50% of women workforce in industries and manufacturing sector is from Tamil Nadu. And on the other hand, you have these workers protesting, particularly the way the nurses' protest is being handled. Like in a span of 4 or 5 days, they have been arrested, detained, put in custody, dropped at some random bus stand in the night. Why is that the government is not willing to engage in a dialogue or even listen? The same happened with the sanitary workers. The same happened with the teachers' protest. The same kind of attitude is being shown towards trying to curtail their voices.
Women workers protesting is not new. I mean, we have to recognize that there have been militant protests everywhere in India by Anganwadi workers, by Asha workers, by various types of health workers. Teachers have long been on the street for their rights. Earlier, there were methods of bringing these protests into a negotiating framework. What I'm seeing now is that it's seen as a political threat to the government rather than to, being able to negotiate it as a labor right or as a right of women who are employed through contracts, and to ensure that they actually have reasonable contract. Even if you don't make them permanent, they should be, that the contract will provide them certain types of social security, wage rise, and so on. Consolidated contracts, fixed wages, keeping the wages very abysmally low. These are what is leading to a lot of protests. So it is government not even recognizing women's rights within the present framework. The best employment that women can expect is actually in the public sector, in the government. And if this employment becomes, completely meaningless, then where will women be able to raise their voice?
So can you give us some examples of, when negotiations happen, what is the kind of attitude that's shown towards particularly the women that are protesting? Is unionizing, has this become some kind of a crime?
When women protest and they are able to come together and raise, a demand, it's always, people take it very badly. Women coming and asking us. It's like almost a lot of them have not dealt with women in the public sphere. So when they see this, they actually they're relating it to what is in their own home. So many times when we go to raise demands for women workers and so on, even the minister would possibly start by telling me, my wife actually is saying this, and she does not like to have a domestic worker like this or that. Or can you find her a good domestic worker? So a trade union leader who goes with a set of demands for a set, there is a very little opening to even start a negotiation. I remember once during one government where we would actually raise the complaint with the Women's Commission chairperson, and her husband, who was like a gatekeeper, came and told us that you cannot do this. This was in a previous regime. But by and large, men in our country do not recognize the role of women in labor. There is absolutely no understanding that women workers or women work, just like we don't recognize that the woman who runs your home, whether she cooks, cleans, takes care of your children, or emotionally supports your family or your parents, she's not doing any work. So likewise, when they come here and they are running around in the hospital or cleaning the streets, this is not seen as work. If you were actually driving a truck, they'd possibly think, yeah, she's driving a truck. But a broom is not seen in a progressive way. So I would say that we need to change our worldview, and we need to come to terms with the fact that women have the right to work. That's a progressive right, and that we should be able to sit with them and negotiate as equals. I've had pretty disastrous experiences sometimes, even negotiating with labor department officials. Sometimes they will tell us, you're only asking for export garment workers. They don't earn much, like 8,000-10,000. What do you think they will do? Do you think they can strike for 70 days or 100 days like, Royal Enfield? And, you're put on a back foot because you are being compared to auto sector workers. Now, to me, whether you produce a car or you produce a garment or you produce food in a factory or you cleaning something, these are all jobs. And a job which requires 8-hour intense work should be dealt with correctly. And they have the right to bargain, to protect their earnings, to ensure that the closures, when they happen, that they're remunerated. We don't find this recognition either by the labor department nor by the senior government officials.
Okay, what you said was something which is very interesting. The labor department officials asking you that can they sit in for a protest for 70 days? That is also a clear, view that men can sit and protest for 70 days or 100 days or more than 100 days. If women are protesting, that is seen as a problem. What it takes for women to, come together and sit on a protest? Like, for example, during the sanitary workers protest here in Chennai, I was talking to a lot of women. They were telling me that naanga inga protest la ukkandrukom. We are sitting here at the protest, but the police is going there and knocking our doors. The kind of intimidation, the kind of threats that their families receive. Similarly, in the case of nurses and everywhere, it's the same story. Like, women protesting is seen as a crime.
It is seen as a threat to the people who are in the decision making, the people who are in government. See women as a threat. And women coming together, not listening to them but making demands, is even more unacceptable to them. They're not used to women telling them that, asking them or telling them that we require to be, treated as equals, that you need to respect us, that you need to recognize our labor, our work, our time, our sacrifice, our role in society. So you have only seen them possibly as homemakers, for which you don't actually recognize the kind of care work that they do. To an extent, the Kalaignar Urimai Thogai dictum does recognize that women are contributing to the family. But other than that, it's a marginal recognition which may not have been understood by everyone in even the DMK party, or they might just say, oh, it's okay. our leader has decided to give this money, so it's fine. But did they really understand why he's giving the money? He actually has tried to build an understanding of that women should be recognized. But I'm not sure whether the entire DMK or our whole society looks at it as a tool of empowerment or recognition. They just simply think, okay, he's giving them 1,000 rupees. Now, I don't think women are thinking like this. Women are recognizing that the government has recognized their work. They don't want 1,000 rupees. You can't do much with 1,000 rupees. But they accept it as a recognition of their time, of their work, of, the government making this effort to give it to them. The government made another effort, like the subsidized or free bus scheme. But it was undone almost immediately by the society, by the transport department employees who felt, why should women be given free? Why do they deserve it? And they actually have virtually, the scheme is actually non-functional today because working women can't really access it. So I might...
The free bus scheme?
Yeah.
Why is that so?
Buses don't come on time. They can't access all the buses. So if you have to go to your workplace, like your employer wants you at 7 o'clock, even a factory, even if you're 2 minutes late about punching, you can lose, say, half a day's wage or 1 hour's wage. So women are not depending on this for working. Working women are not depending at all. Some of the working women depend on it when they go back home, but then there's also a complaint that I reach home at 7 in the evening, though I might have finished work at 3. So I think there is a problem with the scheme, and the problem lies in the fact that when the government announces a scheme, the departments which are implementing do not really recognize that as as something that the government wants to do. So they will actually ensure that the scheme is sort of so, what would I say, is completely dismissed or completely, worn out. And then over a period of time, people will stop seeing. The public is not any different. I've seen myself standing on a bus stop when one of these share autos comes by. They would be shouting, oh, come on and sit down. And, oh, you're waiting for the free bus. Oh, and then the whole lot of people will laugh. And so it's so demeaning for those 2 or 3 women who are waiting. They know that they're waiting because they want to save like 20 or 30 rupees. See, 20 or 30 rupees is a lot of money for a daily wage worker or a week. Over a period of time, even a domestic worker pays maybe 1,000 to 1,500 of her wage as travel. So her wanting to save that is a very significant thing. But the people around, the society, the transport workers, they don't know, they don't understand women's issues, and especially those of women workers. So I would say, in general, there's a social, the lack of social and political awareness and the space for women to be, treated as equals and to negotiate.
Also, ma'am, there is also another demand from women workers that the Factories Act has been recently amended, which earlier allowing women to work in dangerous sectors or categories, factories that are considered, work that is considered dangerous was barred. But now it has been opened up. There is some kind of protest. Then there is also a view that, okay, it should be done because there is a requirement for that. But did this process happen with some kind of consultation? Were the stakeholders being consulted before making these amendments?
the industries which require women in dangerous employment are quite a few. It's not just chemical or, certain processes of work, but they're also, even in traditional factories, there may be heat, there might be lack of ventilation, so on, and continuity of processes. So these industries have long been, prohibited for women to work, especially at night. So night work has been sort of enabled in these factories. It's also because a very large number of these factories are in the mobile engineering and auto sector, where they now want to employ women. They see they see that there's a fairly large number of women who are educated, who are willing to come out of their homes, and who are also willing to, work long hours. So that kind of thing, there is a need, they feel, that these laws should be changed. However, I would say one thing. This whole clamor to, include women in night work and to dangerous work and extended hours of work, it sort of is contrary to any modern, development. Because if you do not actually ensure that these women are protected, you will not have your next generation. If they work 72 hours, do they have the energy to run their homes? So I don't think they have consulted anybody. These are people who are in the government or technocratic line, or they're people who don't have any dealings with women at all. And they're just sort of looking at labor in some kind of mechanical AI kind of a structure. So I'm quite amazed how our leaders can even accept these things and bring them as legislation or amendments.
Ma'am, having said that, the union government has brought in 4 labor codes. The unions are protesting, saying that the collective bargaining strength will be reduced. So where are women in these 4 labor codes, and how does these 4 labor codes impact women who are into unions?
The impact on women is absolutely catastrophic, I would say, because women are coming to voice their protest like we have seen in recent years only now. There have been protests for long periods, but they were never seen as workers. And now they have tried in whatever way to at least being recognized as workers and having worker rights. Traditionally, it was always men. Like most of the laws were workmen, relating to workmen. Now the labor codes have even done away with workmen, so there's no question. It's all decided by the employer. It will all be filed, reports will be filed by the employer through online and digital media. This really is a step backward. It is a step backward from, whatever we have achieved in the last 70 years of the trade union movement, where we actually started to use laws and ensure that those laws worked for workers. Laws are just not designed as a law, as a statute, but it's the working of the law which trade unions establish precedent over a period of time. That is important. Now, having removed those laws, but the precedents of the previous laws, how do we take it up? For instance, the Minimum Wage Act. The Minimum Wage Act was initially challenged in so many different ways. It's the Supreme Court judgments that ensure that the Minimum Wage Act would be implemented, or that it would be treated as non-payment of minimum wages. They in fact said a business or company should close down if they can't pay. Or if they don't pay, then it would be like forced labor, and then they have fines and so on. Now, do we really have the Minimum Wage Act in that same format? Or do we all have to start learning again from square one? I think it's a very backward step. I don't think it can be done. I think it is not a national imperative to industrialize or globalize. It is actually just to suppress the voice of the working people and to take us back to pre-independence times where we were absolutely, had to be servile to the business and the British government. I think it is really dangerous, and I feel that governments in the state must have rights, like federal rights, to ensure laws, because labor is on both
concurrent list.
on the concurrent list. So it's very important that right not be taken away. And so it has many ramifications. Centralizing of these labor laws is not a good idea. And I cannot only blame the state government, but this is the ethos that has been created by business industry and a pro-business government at the center.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on this very important issue. Thank you.